Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the All Star Wrestling Review Series for the 9th of May, um, 1981. And, it's an interesting time, to say the least. Um, 1981 is a really kind of a rebuilder year in a lot of ways, in that, they're a couple of years away from Backlund losing the championship. They are in the midst of things like the build for Jimmy Snuka being about a year away. Just a really interesting thing. Seeing Pat Patterson as the um, broadcast colleague to Vince McMahon at this point is kind of heartwarming in a way. We go into some very basic things. Bruno Sammartino in an enhancement talent match. I believe he is one half of the tag team champions at the time. Bruno coming out with Arnold Skaaland, who is also the manager of none other than the WWF champion Bob Backlund at the time. Sammartino, obviously, I actually like the tag belts from this time period. I hadn't seen much of them, but it's there. The enhancement match, basically, the talent facing Bruno tries to jump him from behind and kicks him down pretty hard. Bruno comes back with the basic things, including kind of a jumping knee, and at this point, Bruno still a major force. Hard kick by Bruno, and again, we kind of go off to some really interesting runs there, and kind of choke out of by the heel, and just to see Bruno in an enhancement match after all this time is interesting in the sense that he's kind of going forward and doing what he needs to do 40 plus years ago, and still I would much rather watch most of this than the average stuff that's on today, simply because every move matters, whether it's a punch and a guy sells it, whether it's a kick and a guy sells it, whether it's a headlock that looks like he's actually trying to put a guy out of commission. It's just interesting to me that, you can get a punch kick style from the 60s through the early 80s, through the rock and wrestling era, the beginning thereof, and now you have guys who literally will jump off top ropes and cut 3 flips, and it's not even a 1.5 count. And to me, it's disrespectful to the art that is professional wrestling, to say the very least. Anyway, jump kicks by Sammartino while he has the man in the ropes, and Sammartino basically punches and goes to town on the guy. Tries to hook up I guess you'd say, modified toe hold. Bruno then with the Irish whip doesn't get all he wants on that. Does get enough and leads the guy into the ropes, shoves him in, and you notice that the ropes have a lot more give in this time period than others. Hard kick to the chest, and getting nearly 10 minutes out of this, the stomp down on Bruno, and we see kind of the continuation of that going forward. The side headlock, and then the shove off into a double tackle there. Match slows down a bit as Bruno finally finds a way to get a power slam and gets a victory out of that. So then we move to the next match, which is a squash match for Mil Mascaras. I don't know. Mil Mascaras at the time, who is facing another masked talent, which is interesting in the sense of not that many masked talents. Mascaras tries to pull the guy into kind of a submissive role and kind of gets a leg lock into an arm bar and arm wringer. Mascaras kind of stays on, rolls through, basic stuff, kicks up and around and behind, and then basically tries to teeter his man up and off, and ultimately we see Mascaras a lot during 1981, which is something I didn't know because, again, I was born this year, so my recollection, unless I went back and watched a lot of this stuff, would be non-existent, and unfortunately, footage before kind of To me, footage before 1984 is somewhat scarce. Not impossible to find, but harder to find than average. Um, and I mean, you do find some, but you have to go hunting for it. Anyway, Mascaris with the stomp on the fingers and eventually gets the victory, and actually does offer the man a handshake, and the opponent does shake the hand of Mascaris. And ultimately, I mean, kind of the roll through and the basics. He's also known for the crossbody, which gets utilized primarily here. Seeing replays as far back as 81 is interesting to me as well. To think that 4 decades ago and how much has changed. But a crossbody off the second rope was a finish then. It's not even a short-term transition hold now. Don Muraco out with the Grand Wizard. Muraco has been new to the area. Wizard says it's taken them 5 years to get there, and Muraco's there for gold. Be it Intercontinental or World Gold, doesn't really matter. He's making fun of Bruno Sammartino, making fun of Backlund, making fun of just about everybody, and mocks Dusty Rhodes, basically tells the world to get an opponent for Rhodes because he's tired of seeing Rhodes' fat self there. Of course, Rhodes comes in 78 during the, or actually 77, early 78, during the reign of Superstar Graham, and has a series of matches with him at the Madison Square Garden. Muraco here looks to be in probably the best shape of his career, at least the best I've ever seen him. So, new regard for Don Muraco at this time. I was unfamiliar with his work prior to, let's say, the rock and wrestling era. So, just seeing what people see in him now as a promo guy is really entertaining. Then there is an enhancement match for Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes against Moose Monroe. Rhodes comes out with nothing but a black robe and in a rare northern appearance. Of course, Dusty Rhodes does come into the WWF 9 years later in 1989, but the majority of his stuff in Georgia and Florida and the NWA territories through the, let's say late 60s to that 1989 run. Anyway, Dusty cranks on the arm wringer, arm bar, basic stuff. The Moose is unimpressed with Rhodes, but that doesn't seem to stop Dusty at all by any stretch of the imagination. Rhodes eventually does take the bigger man down, work over the leg grapevine, stays on the hold a little bit, doesn't get all he wants on it. Big bear hug by the Moose, and match probably for a enhancement match goes longer than it needs to. The referee right in there does get the advantage, and Dusty, of course, uses his power to make his way out. The bionic elbow is used as the offensive maneuver here to lead Rhodes to a victory, and Dusty does exactly that. Then we go to another kind of enhancement style match with Rick McGraw against Chris Kanyon. Chris Kanyon, of course, ends up becoming King Kong Bundy. So Bundy in this role against McGraw literally months before he would go to Dallas and become a Big Daddy Bundy. Just odd to see him in purple tights and kind of slapping away rather nonchalantly, if I do say so myself, at Rick McGraw. McGraw passing away early in 84, 85, which is weird because he looked to be in good shape, but I believe it's a heart attack that chases him away. McGraw chases Kanyon out of the ring pretty abruptly here. Kanyon using some more power maneuvers and body slams along the way. You can easily see that he eventually will have a run, although imagining what he looks like as King Kong Bundy, just think about this, 4 years later and he's on top of the world. So a gimmick change can mean all the difference in the world, and that's important to today's independent talent. If something you're doing isn't working, try something different. Kanyon eventually drops the elbow, and McGraw actually picks up the win because Kanyon is in the enhancement talent role here. Think about that. Bundy doing enhancement talent work for a promotion, and McGraw kind of gets the slip behind victory. Kind of slips on a banana peel there, and gets the victory. That is good for uh, Rick McGraw, who's around the promotion up until his untimely passing, I do believe, on and off. Then we go to another enhancement talent match here, and just an interesting run there. Um, it's interesting because guys don't waste a lot of time. SD Jones is SD Jones and Dominic DeNucci are your tag team here, and they're facing Johnny Rods and Pete Mitchell. Um, DeNucci, obviously the guy who trained both Shane Douglas and most notably Mick Foley, aka Cactus Jack, but a multi-time tag team champion in the 70s and early 80s. Both guys roll through with some arm locks. SD Jones still in this point in 1981, a B-Town C-Town draw. I wouldn't say he was ever A-Town, but does get a rub here and there, and a bit of a journeyman. DeNucci sent into the corner, and DeNucci with firing out with forearms. DeNucci, not a guy I've seen a lot of his wrestling, so he's kind of a lumbering fellow, almost like a Don Leo Jonathan. Takes his opponent into the opposite corner, as it were, getting a bit of an advantage there. And then we see SD Jones tag in. Try to crank down on the arm or crank up on the arm, depending on your perception. Double kicks, double Irish whips, and shots by DeNucci, and ultimately Mitchell comes in, Johnny Roz comes in, Roz in with SD Jones, leaning on the ropes, and the referee having a little bit of trouble keeping everybody in the right corner. DeNucci comes back in and takes some shots from Roz. Rod's not taking a backward step. DeNucci comes back to his feet and gets an advantage wherever he can get it. Mitchell comes back in almost because DeNucci lazily lets him go. Good bit of power maneuvering by DeNucci over the next several minutes. Doesn't get all he wants on the maneuver, but manages to get a shot, and ultimately DeNucci and SD Jones do eventually get the victory. Jones drops an elbow where he can and gets every advantage he can get. And again, that's not before kind of a cutoff. Pedro Morales up next, Intercontinental Champion. Pedro Morales in a non-title match with Ron Starr. Starr is super aggressive, going after Morales. At the time, Morales is your Intercontinental Champion, and without a doubt, that is a rough role to be in for a guy like Pedro on this particular day, because Starr stays on him for a good bit of time, punch, kick, and trying to choke, trying to do whatever he can to get an advantage. Eventually, the match spills to the outside, and needless to say that Morales does rally, getting the eventual things going back in his direction, shot to the breadbasket, and with a couple of minutes left, a turnover into a Boston Crab, and your Intercontinental Champion gets a victory off the Boston Crab. Weird to see a submission victory to the Crab in 1981, but that will close us off for today. We will be back with more right after this.